thank you for being here today. And we're really excited to have three amazing speakers with us. And so, yeah, let's start off. For our agenda today, we will be first introducing our DNIC host, me, and our participants. We'll go through our panelist questions, uh, a little bit about their kind of personal career journeys, how when they started, where they are now, navigating challenges and how they overcame them, some strategies for mental health. We've all experienced some high pressure environments lately, and the role of allyship and support, how leaders can better support women in tech. As we've mentioned, there needs to be more women in tech. And so, like, what are the things that we can do to better facilitate that? And at the very end, we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A. So participation is highly encouraged. If you have questions throughout the panel, save them for this Q&A portion. They're very, very welcome. And yeah.
Yes, hi, my name is Charlene Liu. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm one of the founders of DNIC. I'm very happy to have you with us. I'm very excited about today's panel. Thank you, Lilian, for co-hosting this with me. So before that, at every webinar, we'll talk a little bit about DNIC. We started in 2019, and when we were organizing Shanghai Pride in China. So during that time, many companies we worked with requested for some DEI training and also advice on how to localize their global policies in their APAC offices. Our team comes from diverse backgrounds, and we have a global perspective through our lived experience. So right now we're now based in, some of us are based in Europe, one of us in the US, and a few of us in APAC. All right, Lilian, back over to you to introduce our speakers.
Yeah, we have three amazing speakers today. We have Joe Portlock, who is the Vice President of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging from LexisNexis Risk Solutions. Brittany McPherson from Switch, and her title is Human Resource Information System and Compliance Manager. And Cathrine Hansen from Sonion, and People Culture Business Partner. And we're very excited to have all three of them. And yeah, well, let's just get started because we're here to listen to you guys. We'll start off with Joe. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of things you'd like to share with us.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Happy to. I will not read all of that. If you
Yes.
don't mind, I'll just give you the verbal version if that's okay. So thank you. Delighted to be here. My name's Jo. I am the VP of Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging. However, we have actually rebranded that function to People, Culture and Belonging. I work for LexisNexis Risk Solutions, which people may or may not have heard of. Perhaps folks in the States are a little bit more likely to have heard of us. We're part of the RELX group. We have 10,000 employees, a third of which are in technology. So talking about women in tech and improving diversity in tech is something I'm really passionate about. It was kind of what drew me into this work as just like an obvious problem, and I like problems to fix. Bit more about me. I've been at my company for 12 years. I've been doing this role for 6. It was my first step into D&I. I kind of just like got off of that blank sheet of paper job, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll do that. That's got to be a growth market, right? And the last couple of months, I'm sure we'll talk about, been quite interesting to say the least. I'm neurodiverse. I live with a non-visible disability, so I'm always advocating for those groups. I have a young boy called Maxwell who I can hear in the background shouting for his dinner, but hopefully he knows not to come in. And outside of work, I really love politics. So, I've got a lot of stuff I can watch at the moment, although I am trying to consciously take a little bit of a break sometimes as well. I like cooking. I love secondhand sustainable fashion. And I know we're going to talk about mental health, but I love like the nature. To me is just the best tonic, and it is needed at the moment. So that's just a bit about me.
Thanks so much, Joe. And Brittany, would you like to introduce yourself? I love this photo of you, by the way.
Thank you so much for having me today. So my name is Brittany McPherson. I am the Human Resources Information Systems and Compliance Manager here, based out of Las Vegas for Switch Data Centers. As you all know, the data center industry is booming right now. So I definitely feel that, especially these days, this panel is very relevant for folks. It's an interesting feat to be an HR person in tech. You get a lot of interesting personalities and a lot of interesting experiences. So I love to, chat about this with people who kind of have a shared experience as well. It's kind of a rare treat for me. So I'm super excited. So just a little bit about me, as you can kind of see, I'm a little bit bombastic with the way that I dress. So I totally understand what you mean, Joe, when you say you have a passion for sustainable fashion. I agree with that as well. But a little bit more for me on the professional side. I'm actually, I started off as a human resources person, a specialist, but I kind of grew into my niche in the information systems part of human resources and kind of found my place. I am naturally an introvert, so being on the back end kind of also suited me as well. I still interact a lot with our team members, and I do enjoy that, but there's nothing better for me than to get into a system and problem solve. I definitely love that. Um, I actually have about 10 years of experience in human resources. I also am a member of our local human resources chapters, Society for Human Resource Management, as well as HRCI, which I think they both have international branches as well. So, you know, that's typically where I get all of my interactions with fellow human resources professionals. So in my free time, I'm a self-proclaimed nerd. So I love anything sci-fi, horror, anything like that, video games. But I'm also an artist, so I love painting, drawing, and anything that's tactile and you have to use your hands for. And because of that, it kind of also lends well to thinking outside the box when it comes to problem solving. So I'm super excited to be here today and to chat more with all of you. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brittany. I love how everyone brings like their personality and also like their experiences into their role. And like even with Joe, talking about neurodivergence and all of that as well. And thank you so much. Awesome. Catherine, please tell us a little bit about you.
Hey everyone, I'm Cathrine. So yeah, currently I am working at Sonion. Maybe I shouldn't be reading this because I'm getting a bit distracted. I'm working at Sonion as a people and culture business partner since October actually, so quite new in the job. So I'm not sure people know Sonion as well, but they make technical components to hearing aids instruments. And it's actually the first time I work in a more hardware oriented company. Before I worked in software and fintech. So I'm living in the Netherlands. I'm living in Amsterdam. I've been here for 2.5 years. And the job before Sonion was in a scale up in fintech, where I was the first and only people partner. Then before that, I was in China and I lived in China for 5 years. Started my career there basically. So it was a bit of a random thing that I ended up there. And it was also actually very random that I ended up in HR. I thought I was going to end up in marketing or something because I studied communications. But yeah, I started my career there in international HR in a really nice supportive team. in a translation company in Beijing, and then later I moved to Shanghai, and that's also how I know Charlene and Lilian. And then after a few years, I moved to a HR business partner role for a Chinese unicorn software interior design company. So they were very high tech and had a lot of fun tools and stuff like that. I'm not really a tech savvy person, to be honest, but I really enjoy the HR work. And I was just always open-minded to the industries and wanted to try different things, and wanted to take my career abroad and live abroad. So yeah, I just kind of randomly ended up in certain places. And I like that that HR can take you in many different places, in many different industries and countries. Even I was able to move across different countries. I also worked a bit in Australia when I studied there in a HR role. So really, you can just work in HR anywhere, and I really love that. And it's very people facing. You can do a lot of projects. Yeah, there's just so much to learn. Like it's like an endless learning opportunity. So so yeah. And outside of work, I also do some consulting for DEI, and I also volunteer at the moment for Asian Pride in Amsterdam. And before I was volunteering for Shanghai Pride. So I really enjoy this topic about allyship because I'm an ally as well and advocate for that. Other than that, I clearly don't like to be bored, so I try to travel as much as possible. And right now I'm in Dubai on a holiday, but still really nice to be here today.
We're all very jealous. Thank you so much, Catherine, for sharing. And it's also really cool to see how everyone's kind of connected in this panel through all our relationships. And even though we're all over the world right now. And awesome. So our first question, our first panel question is kind of about your personal career journey. I want you to kind of go back, to when you first started your career. Where were you then? How were you feeling then? And how do you feel now, kind of like looking back at, your achievements or the things you have overcome? I think there's one more button to press, Shar. There we go. Is this where you expected to be today? Yeah. Can I have Brittany answer first, and then I'll move to Catherine and Joe, so we mix up our sequence a little bit, if you guys don't mind.
Sure. Okay, so I will say, entering the workforce, I felt excited. I felt excited to make a difference, and I always look at myself as an advocate in human resources. I actually had the benefit of having some strong mentors in human resources. So I was able, my landing into human resources was actually kind of more of a soft landing because I did have people to kind of show me the ropes and I could bounce ideas off of. And that was everything to me to this day. I still send my HR mentor flowers. So because she's everything. So, and honestly, when I started, I was doing some of everything. And I think a lot of human resources professionals find themselves in this same experience where one day you might be working on employee relations, and then the next you might be doing organizational planning and things like that. So I was excited to test out all the different functional areas of human resources, and which later kind of solidified the fact that this is kind of what I want my career to look like. I also saw the potential for growth and development in this industry. And honestly, just in my personal life, having a lot of tech experience, I definitely expected to have some sort of role to kind of grow that, because my passion at that time, even then, was systems and things like that. And then I've always, even prior to working in human resources, I've always worked for tech companies. So I also have that background. But then naturally, being a tech person in tech, to me, I was like, this is exactly where I want to be. I can be a human resources person and be the tech person that I've always wanted to be. So, like I said, I think I got really lucky, and I was able to find my niche fairly early on, and I had people in my corner helping me to develop that talent. So,
That's awesome. Yeah,
mhm.
that's amazing. I love that you felt that you had the space to grow and develop. And I think that's sometimes a challenge for some people when they don't have the sufficient support and it feels like there isn't space for growth and development in an organization. So that's really cool. Thanks for sharing, Brittany. Catherine.
Yeah, I really like this question because it also makes you reflect about your own career. I also agree with what Brittany said about making a difference, being very excited about that. I feel like in HR, you really have a chance to implement a lot of things in companies. But I will also say that with time, you learn all of the pushbacks that you might be getting. And I think I might also mention a bit about that later as well, like with the challenges. But yeah, I think in the beginning of my career I was very excited, but also a bit impatient because I feel like when you're younger, you're just very like, oh my God, I want to get here and go there and do all of these things like as soon as possible. And I think I felt that way a lot with, for example, like growth as well, personal growth. I remember like my first job, really, there was a lot of fast-paced growth for me there. And I was like an international HR associate and grew into international HR senior manager within 1.5 years, which is really like crazy when you think about it. But that was the thing about China, you could really move super fast in companies, especially like pre-COVID, I would say. But then later I became a HR business partner, and then I've been that for 5 years. And I really enjoy the job because it has all that variety I like to do. But then later on, I realized other things became more important than just grow. So for example, I don't know if it's like a thing in the 30s as well, but like focusing more on benefits and well-being and enjoying the job rather than just, oh, I want that title, I want this and that salary promotion within these few months. So yeah, I feel like that was a big difference, yeah, within my own career.
I love that reflection. I think it's super interesting that like values shift, like a priority shift. And I think that's very,
Exactly.
very realistic. I mean, I feel that too myself. So thanks for sharing, Catherine. And last but not least, Joe.
Yeah, thank you. So it is yeah, I agree. It's a very good question because it made me think back a lot. I feel like I was almost like professionally naive when I started working. I just did not know any corporate roles. I thought like your degree, oh, I've got a degree, that must, have some kudos in an organization. Turns out it has very little. I think one massive mistake I used to make is I thought everybody thought the same. And now, ironically, I work in a profession that advocates everybody thinks differently, and that's a brilliant thing. But I didn't really give it much thought early in my career. I just like, yeah, this is good. Right, let's just do this. I don't really need to think about engaging, making the case for it. And, I've sort of really swung into a world where I almost do the opposite. I also like never used to use my degree, and I've got a background in psychology. So working in DEI, like I use my degree far more. It's probably a bit out of date, everything that I used to research in the sort of early 2000s, but it really aligns to what I do. I think along the way I've learned a lot of lessons. I remember that slide I'm sure people have seen that sort of talks about 10% of the 10% of promotions are based on skill, and being shocked by it, feeling like, what do you mean you don't get promoted on skill? And I guess that definitely plays into the DEI space, that it isn't really about your skills in terms of fairness. Because I remember being hit by the unfairness of, surely if you have skills, if you work hard, that's got to be the recipe for promotion. And then sort of learning so much along the way. It's about your brand, it's about your networking, it's about having your A game moments in front of your senior people. So I remember that being one of the first moments in my career that I felt like my values really jarred with what I was being told. but I also think, and what I love about what I do now is, yeah, working like tech, data, AI. Personally, find it fascinating and really cool. So certainly align with that a lot more. I've been taken to some unexpected places in my career. I definitely believe in saying yes. So the first time I went to China, and I had a team of people in HR reporting to me. I've never been to China. I might have. I think they thought I had more international experience than I did. I'd worked in Europe, but never in China, so I learned a lot. But you know, I always think, you know, it's better to try than not. If you're going to miss the bus, miss it running, right? Don't miss it standing still or being late. So I actually feel like now I'm in a space where I love what I do. I experiment. It plays so much more to my strengths, my neurodivergence, my introversion. You know, I feel like you know yourself so much better as you advance in your career as well. And hopefully that helps you make much better choices too.
Thanks for sharing, Joe. I did forget to mention Joe used to work in Hong Kong, and that's how Charlene and Joe kind of got connected and did some events together. So it's really cool how we're all so tightly interconnected. And also very cool how I see all three of you kind of found your niches through, you know, all these different experiences. And Joe, your story kind of reminds me of what the young people say these days, do it for the plot. And I actually really like that sentiment of like, yeah, just say yes and see what happens, you know. It makes things kind of exciting. Awesome. So for the next question, we're talking about navigating challenges and overcoming barriers. So what are some of the challenges you have faced as a woman in tech? And it could be, you know, new challenges that have emerged with the evolution of tech, and it could be old challenges we've seen time and time again. Um, let's start with Cathrine this time and move to Joe and then Brittany, if that's cool with you guys.
Oh, good. Yeah, so I'm not sure my thoughts and examples would be anything new. But I think the first thing is that it can be really hard sometimes, especially in tech. You're often the only woman in the room. So I think that, okay, maybe depends on your personality or whatever, but I think for me, it's been really hard sometimes to find confidence to like find your own voice or like to speak up. I've been feeling very shy, but also I think quite humble. So I'm from Denmark, and it's also really a big part of the culture. Like you have to be humble. And I think, for example, working for an American scale-up company, that was like more that was a lot about like getting visibility and stuff like that. And that felt a little bit tough sometimes because it was a bit, yeah, not so much in my personality. And then you also have that male dominated leadership. So I think as a HR, it can be a little bit hard sometimes when you need to get that buy-in from leadership about different initiatives and projects. And I think definitely throughout the years as a HR business partner, I've really been more on the people partnering side of HR rather than business partnering. And I really had to find that balance. So yeah, I've had a very people first HR perspective, I would say. So for example, when we had to do benefits implementation and stuff like that, I found it like, okay, it's a bit hard sometimes when you have to adjust your mindset and think of it from a different perspective, perhaps sometimes than your own perspective. And then, yeah, if your manager is also male, there's just like, you're literally the only woman in the room almost. So yeah, so for example, like with benefits implementation in one company, there's also this focus on high performance culture, and I managed to get some well-being, like mental health well-being initiative in place, and also the Headspace app, and I was quite proud of that because I was like, okay, at least I got that from from all these male leaders. So yeah, that was nice. But yeah, it was definitely challenging, and I think for me, I think overcoming those barriers were really about building strong relationships and trust within the immediate team. So really having like a core team with your own immediate team and with your own immediate colleagues was really good, because there was also like pressure or pushbacks from other departments. And having that psychological safety in your own team, I found really important, because then, you were actually able to, let's say, conquer a lot of people or a lot of barriers that were trying to go against you in different ways. So I think really like having those allies and also just making friends at work. When I worked in one of the Chinese companies, it was like an office of 300 people, and we were 2 expats in the office. So just having that one other person whom I also like knew through other friends, so we could easily relate to each other. It really helped a lot. So if you had a bad day, or if there was a manager that it was hard to work with or something like that, it was really good. So I think those are like the main things I could think of.
I think that's a great point about just like the power of the collective and like having a sense of like small community almost at work that can be supportive. And I also like how you mentioned that you struggled finding confidence because, you guys seem so, successful and high achieving, but you struggle with finding confidence too. And so I feel that's very
Yeah.
real, especially when you're the only woman in the room, right? That's a very, very, it's something that happens in real life. So thank
Yeah.
you so much for sharing, Catherine. And I think I said Joe and then Brittany, right?
Yeah, sure. So I always find tech so interesting because I think it's such a good example of when you have underrepresentation, how that probably unintentionally impacts culture and behavior. So the sort of little nugget I use a lot is that if you're in a minority of less than 25%, this is just research. I don't know what 25% seems to be the significant number. You tend to become quite silent, and you become quite a silent, inactive minority. And there's something switches when it becomes over 25%. You tend to feel more emboldened. You're more likely to speak up and ask for things. So the low percentages in tech just play into a way that people behave that just feels like we conform, we don't stand out, and you can argue women are a little bit more predisposed to do that anyway. So I think and then things just compound, right, where you have low representation because then you have low levels of sponsorship, mentorship. We know women's careers are particularly impacted by what I'll call the maternity penalty, in that when women, if they choose to have children, it really impacts their pay and progression. When men have children, it actually accelerates their pay and progression or career progression. So if and when you want to do that and you need some flexibility, you're statistically more likely to have a conversation with a line manager who's a man. And, I'm sure this is unintended, but it might make the conversations harder because their lived experience and perceptions of flexibility might be very different. I also think when you have a group of individuals in a significant minority, you have to just be more bias aware, right? You're so much more likely to create cultures with bias because you don't have all the perspectives shaping decisions, how we approach things, how our culture is. And so I think within tech, just bias awareness has to become really part of every day, because the sort of setup of the people balance is sadly going to suggest it's going to be more likely to creep in. And I guess the value of role models as well. I hear it less now. I used to go to women in tech events when they used to say, "Hey, look how amazing Ada Lovelace is." It's like, yeah, she kind of died like nearly 200 years ago. Is that the best role model for women in tech? Not that she wasn't amazing, as obviously I'm sure people know, the sort of mother of algorithms. And of course, we celebrate Ada Lovelace Day. But it's like, I think if, as somebody said, which I thought was very funny, you wouldn't say, have a career in music, look how successful Mozart was. And so I think having those role models of women in tech, actually, tech is undoubtedly the future. there are so many jobs, and there's potentially quite a worrying trend where jobs that will get automated by AI are jobs that women are more likely to do, like accounting, administration, operations. And the jobs of the future that will accelerate will be in technology. So I don't fully lean into it, but I've heard the argument that just the way AI will take place in our workplace could actually make the gender imbalance even worse just by the nature of the job. So it's just, I'm so passionate about it because I just think it's so important for gender parity holistically that we have more women within technology.
Yeah, definitely. And not just, more women in the office, but represented at every stage of the technology design, implementation, evaluation and risk analysis. And also, what are the unintended consequences? I think that's also some of the things that we don't always talk about. And, the importance of DEI in this space, because the problems could very much compound over time, like Joe, you've been saying. And so yeah, that's such an important aspect of tech that for us to consider as well. So for mental health, just what are some strategies for mental health? What are some things you do in your personal life during high periods of high pressure or high stress? Yeah.
Well, I will say I work in a very fast-paced role. My company is also a fast-paced company where I may have, I get, lots of emails every day, and I know a lot of HR people have the same experience where everything is a priority, right? Like, and so everything's coming at you all at once. I also get a lot of people who say, okay, when are you going to get this done? Can you give me a deadline? Can you give me a timeline? And so it's very easy to kind of, if you're not on guard for this, to internalize this. But someone actually gave me some really good advice on this. And it also made me reflect on how I interact with my coworkers. But essentially what she was saying was, you can't assume that your priorities are the same as that person's their priorities. And so I thought about that and I said, well, let me think about how I'm also, moving throughout my workspace and my workday. And then also I need to make sure I'm setting boundaries and being very clear about expectations, about timelines, and being very transparent about that. So then that way, I can kind of help train more or less, individuals on like, okay, if you do send me this and you need something done, or, you have a question and you need answered, right away, let me give you some reasonable, options and expectations of when I can get back to you. And just making sure that, I stay organized as much as possible from my end. I try to utilize different tools and software to make sure that I'm organized. But I will say, I make sure that I establish clear boundaries between my work time and my personal time. I know that it's hard and it's very tempting to answer that late night email, but you really have to think, you want to be cultivated and well-rounded as a person. You want to make sure that you're not neglecting your own well-being and mental health. And in times of stressful situations, I've been known to say, okay, we wrapped up a meeting. I, have all these directives and things I have to do. Maybe I need to take a deep breath. Maybe I need to take a walk and do some check-ins with myself. Just to make sure that I'm not overwhelmed, or I can recognize the signs of when I'm nearing burnout. But also in my downtime when it's, time for me to relax, oh, I do. I make sure I make time for my friends and family and for myself. And I also encourage my coworkers and, my other HR people who people may not always think of them. I always make sure that they know that I'm thinking of you and please let me know what I can do to help support you and to make sure that you're also able to set those same boundaries and unplug whenever you can. And just make sure that you are aware of what's going on with your own mental health. You're not neglecting your actually mental or physical health, and you're staying on top of things, because especially if you're in this for the long run, you have to be prudent and smart about what you're doing and what pressures you're putting on yourself. So.
Thank you for sharing, Brittany. I'm so sorry. I realized I skipped your answer just now. So, can you share with us some of your challenges and ways you've overcome them? And I'm sure you put out fires every day. So,
Oh, yes. I would say that. I think also, being a woman of color in the tech space, you do face some really unique challenges. Um, I think I really identify with Cathrine when she said finding your confidence. And my brother also says something to me, you fake it till you make it. So I am not an actor unlike you, Lilian, but when I go into spaces, I become the person I want to be. And I try not to internalize maybe some microaggressions I might be experiencing. And one thing I also do is, I do my homework. I learn to speak the language and understand what they're wanting to hear. And I also identify with what Joe is saying, find your allies, find the people that can stand in your corner, and that they will, so that way you'll be able to gather consensus and, understand how to network. And I rely heavily on those who have come before me, the women that have come before me, and were those trailblazers. And like I said, I do have mentorships and professional like allies in the industry that I will come to and say, hey, I have a problem. Please, can I run this by you? I'm sorry to bug you. Can I take you out for coffee or tea? And can we talk about this? But yeah, I definitely think that sometimes you do experience microaggressions, but we do that in everyday life as a person. If you're in any other type of category, you're going to experience this in everyday life. And I try to take the same approach in the tech field. You can't let that get you down. You got a job to do. You have to be an advocate, and you're here to help the employee, right? And make sure that their voices are heard as well. So that keeps me going. So yeah.
thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, Brittany. Can't let it get you down. You got to find your allies and you got to do your homework, Brittany says. All right, back to mental health. And I think Cathrine is the next to share a little bit about what are some ways you cultivate your mental health.
Sure. Yeah, I really, really like some of the things that Brittany said. I think just what you said in the end, as HR, we are here for the employees, and that's like a motivator. So you can have some really tough times and a lot of whatever it is, leaders or other stakeholders going against you. But at least if you are advocating for your values as a HR person, and also for the company's values, if you align with the company's values, hopefully, then yeah, that's really a good motivation to work a little bit harder. But when you have the motivation and the engagement yourself, you can also go a long way. I will also say, again, echoing what Brittany said about boundaries, it's really hard to say no sometimes as well. And I guess that's not just a female thing or a tech thing or HR thing, but for example, at my first job, I was at some point reporting directly to the CEO because it was like a medium-sized company. And my supervisor or manager, she resigned. And then I started to work pretty hard, I would say, for that CEO sometimes. And really it was hard to say no because she was a CEO. And also in my second job, I worked pretty long hours because I was working in China, but working for the US offices as well. So it's like a 12 hours difference. But in any of my jobs, and also till this day, I really try to fully relax on the weekends. Just do like anything else but work. Nothing to do with work. Don't look at the emails. Don't, just fully clock out, and whatever you want to do, you want to lay in bed all weekend, or you want to work out, or you want to party, like it doesn't matter. It's just that really has helped me a lot. And yeah, just working a bit extra longer hours on the weekdays, but then that when the weekend comes, you can totally, just wind off in your mind. I think also, again, like the whole psychological safety and having a safety net at work, having those allies, having a mentor or supervisor if you can. If not, then just make some friends wherever possible. And again, also just support outside of work. I would also say, I think this was maybe also mentioned, that having something outside of work that is meaningful for you, that it's maybe a bit related to your career, whether it's a side job, volunteering, or anything else, that makes you feel like your full-time job is not necessarily like the only thing in your world, so that you don't completely rely on your full-time job. You also have a community, let's say a professional community outside of work, so that there might be some opportunities if something happens, because you never know what happens, especially in tech. It's a very fast-paced environment. So yeah, anything can happen.
That is so true. I just had a couple of friends get retrenched recently, and so yeah, it's been tough in the tech industry.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I mean, the economy's been tough. So yeah,
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned having community outside of work, or having something meaningful outside of work. I think that's a really important, like, life uh advice. So yeah,
Yeah.
thanks so much, Catherine. Joe.
Yeah, so I mean, I think loads of good things and suggestions. I definitely agree with. I mean, stress is actually good. It's just how you manage it, right? That where it becomes potentially dangerous. So I agree with the boundaries at work. Somebody once gave me really good advice about don't let number 5 and 6 on your to-do list stop you doing 1 and 2. So I'm quite disciplined about writing to-do lists, thinking how long things are going to take to do. And I personally just like the satisfaction of getting things delivered. Um, I think you also have to think about your dopamine. I'm a big believer that there's good and bad dopamine, right? So coffee, social media, chocolate is all bad dopamine. Good dopamine is walking, nature, doing something you love, spending time with the people you love, all the things that, give us that high, but actually are pretty good. They're sort of we're generating our dopamine rather than trying to sort of consume it. And I've also always believed, energy levels are so important, particularly in DNI. I'm just so conscious when you work in DEI, you are often from a minority group in some description. The majority of people who work in this space have a lived experience that brings them to this work, and you're given so many jobs, and that extends out. When you look at ERGs, you are talking to people who don't always have the best experience in society, who experience exclusion quite regularly, who have a day job and probably have to be more perfect in that day job. And then you layer on top, can you educate everybody? Could you run some events? Could you do this? So I always am mindful of how many jobs do people have, right? Are we giving people lots of extra jobs? And I do think you have to manage your energy levels according to that, right? I feel energy, you generate energy. It's not a battery that just drains and you sleep and it's up again. I mean, obviously that's important, but I also think you can create your own energy. And how you do that, whether that's time by yourself, whether that's time with people, whether that's feeling like people have your back and you have psychological safety, whatever it is that you need to do to generate energy, do it and make the time for it. And I guess lastly, I'd probably say, because I think it's really important in these times, you have to have your means of professional distancing. Sometimes inclusion work feels like the weight of the world, right? And you're trying to create fairness sometimes in a really unfair world, and it feels a very daunting task. So I think as much as it's always good to be informed, know what's going on in the world, look at the news, I also think you also have to watch Married at First Sight of an evening, or have a bath, or just do what, just watch something that takes your mind completely away from it. I just think sometimes has to be a really really good tonic for you just to kind of get through those really challenging times that I think we're experiencing.
Definitely. I love that. Taking distance and time away, but also I love what you said about just being mindful of like the jobs you're assigning to people. Or I feel like in my time in corporate there are so many meetings I've sat in where I don't know what the purpose of the meeting is, and we're just there to have a meeting. And I just feel like I'm very also try to be mindful about, you know, efficiency and like people putting time into something, and that we're using this time, you know, effectively. So yeah, I appreciate everything you've shared, Joe. Thank you so much. I think we're on to our final question on allyship and support. So very quickly, if you guys have any examples of allyship or support, I will leave it up to you guys. If you have a great story, please share. You can also choose to skip this question if you'd like. But yeah, please, any examples of support, allyship you've experienced in work, from male colleagues or male leaders, even better if you have stories about that. So yeah.
I think, sorry.
Go ahead.
I mean, like, firstly, I said at the beginning, I'm neurodiverse or divergent, if you prefer. So I always feel if it wasn't for allies, I'd either be your best employee or your worst employee, right? The psychological safety, sponsorship, advocacy, allyship I've experienced in my life with people forgiving, you know, what I'm really not good at and embracing what I'm good at, right? It's just been my way of working. I think as it's coming up to International Women's Day, the best male allies are the ones that show up open and curious, right? And I think too often we see performative allyship. So people will show up but not listen, or not show up in an open sense. I think sometimes we see people feeling they're here to help, to save, that, you know, there's a dynamic that they're sort of coming in a different role. And I think the real great work happens when we all come here open, curious, and on an equal footing. So the best allies that I've ever seen, you know, have been the ones that talk the least and listen the most and are genuinely curious and have found their reason why they care.
I love that. Being genuinely open and willing to listen is one of the best traits an ally can have. Brittany or Catherine, would either of you like to have a cool story to share?
I will say, one of my early mentors in the tech space was a man. He kind of showed me the ropes for my system administration job. And you know, Joe, you're 100% correct. Listening, the best ally is one that listens, and truly listens. And you know, he actually was very transparent with me. He said, these are the things that you may run into in this space. He actually did the exact job that I have now. So he was also an HR person, and he was on the system side of HR as well at tech companies, and also in the casino industry here in Las Vegas. So he had some really fun stories, I'm sure you guys can imagine. But but he would, you know, he was very transparent with me. He said, look, this is what you're gonna face, okay? And it's all about what you do. And you know, you really have to know, you know, kind of where you are. Okay. Really evaluate your employer. Like, is this what you want to continue with, or do you want to move on? I've been very fortunate, and, you know, I've gotten some really good employers I've worked for. So, but, you know, in the past, he's kind of, you know, been open and honest with me. He was very open and honest with me. And very patient with me, showing me the ropes and kind of letting me know what to expect. And he basically let me know, and I already kind of had an idea of this, but he confirmed, you know, you're a woman and it's going to be really interesting for you, and, you know, entering some of these male dominated spaces, but you can never let them see you flinch. I know that's it's a very high thing to think about. And it's kind of difficult to wrap your mind around, because you're like, you're human. Everybody has bad days, good days. But you know, you got to perform, it's kind of like one of those things. You're an actor. Eventually you will become the person that you aspire to be. And just making sure that, yeah, you lean on those people, you rely on those people. And, if you're having a bad day, I have people that I can talk with, they can kind of contextualize things for me. And yeah, I definitely agree with Joe. Just listening, paying attention, and then speaking up as an ally if you see something going on in the spaces that you're in. And if you see someone who is a minority or in another category, staying silent is the worst thing you can do. Because a lot of times, as a minority, you might feel like you're the only person that is experiencing this or having this perspective. But when you see others who, are not a minority, they're the biggest group, and if one of them is saying this isn't right, this will also allow you to feel like, okay, as a minority, I am accepted into this space, and I do have allies here. I do have people watching out for me and people who have my back. And so I think that would be my advice. Just if you see something wrong, say something. Don't stay silent. It doesn't serve anyone. And honestly, when when I can succeed, we all can succeed. When the smallest group in the company, when they're doing well, everyone can do well. So DI is everything, and allyship it's only going to make the company better, so.
Yeah, definitely. Really quick, Catherine, would you like to share a little bit on this question as well, or?
Yeah, sure. I'll try and make it quick because we are
Really
going on.
long time.
Yeah. Yeah, so really good points, by the way. I do have one example, and I had to think through this question. But in my last company in the scale up, one of the co-founders, he was very much an ally, and he was supporting all types of DEI initiatives or events in the company that we will be doing from our HR team. And, one thing is to just giving you buy-in as a leader. Another thing is to actually helping you to organize the event, helping you to just putting things together on an operational level. So I really appreciated that. It probably helped with his intersectionality that he was gay. It was not, I'm sorry to say it, it was not a white, straight man. But yeah, it was still really nice to see a male leader, co-founder actually, who was really supportive of this and just stepping in. And also just recently in my current company in Sonion, we have this International Women's Day event today. And it was a male manager who sent the invite to all the colleagues. That was something I really appreciated. So men to step in and helping organize and just, showing allyship on that level as well, whether it's to do with policies or initiatives, smaller events or something like that. That is something that I really appreciated as well.
Showing up, listening, and being supportive. Definitely. I would like to open the floor up to our audience and participants. If there's anything you'd like to ask our panel of guests, please type your question, or if you feel comfortable, you can also ask your question off mic or on mic, off mute. If there are no questions, I will ask a final question to wrap up our session today. One more chance for questions. I'm going to give it a few more seconds if anyone
I think
has...
someone
There's a
raised
hand
their
up.
someone raised their hand.
Someone has a hand up. Please go ahead.
Hi,
Yeah.
Lilian. Thanks for letting me speak. Just wanted to ask you, so what would be your advice for women that started entering the tech world right now, young women? What would you speakers say about this?
That's a great question. What would you say to young women entering the tech field today?
I would say you got this. You belong. We need you.
Yeah.
I know the days it may be hard and you may be, facing these challenges at the time may seem unsurmountable, but there's nothing that you can't do. And you are not alone. You know, I love this because this also helps build a network of people in similar situations, of women in similar situations. But just never let anyone make you feel like you don't belong in that space, because you do. You're the future. A lot of people don't think that, but you are the future. And so I would say you got this. Just one step at a time, one question at a time, one email at a time, and just keep at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Brittany. Catherine and Joe, would you guys have any advice to give to young women entering the tech field?
But I think firstly, like, you've joined like the right profession at the right time, right? There's just so much that's going to happen in the world, and I think, yeah, we need you, as Brittany said, because we all use tech. In fact, women use tech a little bit more than men, actually. So, if we want things for us, and I think we all remember the bad examples of iPhones too big for women's hands, health apps that don't look at menstruation or fertility, driverless cars that weren't programmed to identify differentiated skin color. All of this happens because there was no diversity in tech, and yet we all use it. So, please stay strong, resilient, find a mentor, and know your place and the importance of what you do.
Yeah, yeah. A great mentor is definitely super important. I know Brittany has a close mentor right now who's also a woman of color, and I think it's really sweet. But yeah, Catherine.
Yeah, I would say tech is a very fast-paced industry. So again, about belonging, creating your own sense of belonging within the industry or in the job or in the field, whatever you do. I think it's really important, so that you have your own agenda, because the agenda, I felt, at least for myself, is always changing. The business is always changing. Yeah, companies can change very quickly, especially in tech. And also, as a woman, just don't be afraid to speak up and make yourself visible. It's okay to make mistakes. And yeah, that's something that I regret a little bit, that I wasn't more outspoken in my own jobs. So yeah.
Don't be afraid to speak up. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing, our dear speakers and panelists. Thank you for sharing your perspective and your experiences and expertise. We really hope at DNIC Virtual we can kind of create a little community and a little network of, people who care about DEI, people who care about, women in tech and things like this. And so that we can be a place for resource and community. And so thank you guys for being a part of this, and thanks to our participants for listening in and also chiming in. And we hope all of you have a nice day.